I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity. To the witnesses, thank you for indulging yet another member that's not on this subcommittee but is on this committee and has great interest in this topic. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to build a little bit off of my colleague, Congresswoman Edwards' question or point, I guess. I'm very interested and active engaged in a number of STEM initiatives in Massachusetts and through the work of this committee. One of the challenges I've seen in Massachusetts is a bit of the mismatch that Ms. Edwards pointed to, but a demand from the private sector to provide more talented engineers and scientists, computer scientists. But as we try to structure what that actually is and looks like, a reluctance of some in the private sector to recognize that this is to look at STEM and STEM initiatives as a long-term investment in their own business and business model, rather than a short-term corporate philanthropy initiative that, given a bunch of iPads or a school field trip or something and taking a photograph and sending that out in their newsletter, that's how it's approached more so than a strategic overall development of an overall strategic plan. And I was wondering if you could give any recommendations to me or to this committee as to how to get the private sector more involved in some of these long-term efforts. Whoever wants to take it.
Well, for one thing, as you've heard a number of times, I think a lot of the problem is not to do anything, it's to stop doing things that are counterproductive and get rid of hurdles and barriers that might have made sense when we were an industrial society and you needed rows of students lined up in seats, and then they take the summer off to, bring in the crops, which I'm sure a lot of them are doing today. But the idea that, for instance, a scientist, a PhD in mechanical engineering, can't go into a school because they're not qualified to teach, that's fine. We don't want to create an issue there. But, for instance, let the students get credits for being on FIRST programs. Let them get college credits. We know the colleges are desperate for our graduates and our alumni. Find ways to take down the barriers that we've historically had between industry and schools, make it easier for the teachers to get credits for being involved with industry and learning how to bring coding into the school. I mean, there's so much structure, which again makes, inertia is a difficult thing to overcome. But knocking down barriers and creating the right incentives, and I'll keep saying it, just showing up and cheering for kids that are doing something. You can't underestimate. You said you weren't actively discouraged. When you look at how many other things were stealing your attention, the co-mission as opposed to the omission, I think you were actively discouraged because of so much else in our culture that was sending you to different places for different reasons. You were lucky, but there are a lot of kids in this country that are going to get past an age where they can develop the skill sets for these great jobs because they were distracted by a whole lot of nonsense. And government can help get rid of some of that nonsense.
Yeah, I would just add, there's a broad range of incentives that the private sector has to invest in R&D and build plants and bring in jobs. It might be worth considering some incentives to foster that long-term thinking that you're talking about, whether it be tax credits or other kinds of incentives. Could be anything from as simple as providing summer teacher internships at businesses so that they can keep current with engineering and scientific practices or coding practices. A lot of the small startup companies are way too small to afford to host these internships like larger companies do, except that's where all the excitement and activity is these days. So I think there are some creative opportunities to incentivize business participation, over the long haul. As you said, that it is a partially self-interested workforce development issue, but it could benefit our STEM education.
Thank you.
If I may answer, I agree with you that many of the efforts you may see from large companies are either trying to just hire the next engineer or trying to hire a high-skilled immigrant or do a laptop giveaway to take a photo opportunity. But we've actually built a very strong coalition of some of the top tech companies thinking long-term, and they're investing in elementary school education, which isn't going to pay them back dividends. It's paying the country dividends. And just to give you a sense, we may be one of the only nonprofits that can claim Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, Salesforce, Juniper, all collectively participating not in small levels, but Google changed their logo for the Hour of Code. Apple put it into every single store in the United States. Microsoft and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg delivered video lectures for us. Amazon hosts our infrastructure. These are all very long-term investments in changing the system. And these companies actually want to form a public-private partnership to bring computer science to all of America's schools.
Thank you, and I yield back my negative time.